Hi, I'm Zaki Manian, co-founder of a protocol called Sommelier. Sommelier is an app chain that organizes, sort of acts as an agent for DeFi activity on a variety of different chains, turns your ETH into more ETH. Basically, it's like core property and somewhat relevant to this question of what does it mean to be building a chain abstracted app. So it uses a Cosmos app chain behind the scenes, but every user who uses it is interacting it from Ethereum or from an L2. So you can think of it as an early chain abstracted app. And so I'll be moderating the panel. I think everyone has spoken except for Dean. So you guys should all, Dean, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Dean Tribble. So, yes, I'm Dean Tribble. I am CEO of Agoric. I'm Dean Tribble. I'm CEO of Agoric. And that is a Cosmos-based layer 1 blockchain for doing smart contracts in JavaScript, but really it's for implementing business logic for cross-chain applications, for multi-chain applications, where it can use native IBC and all of the various bridges to be able to orchestrate the activity that needs to be done in order to achieve the kind of chain abstraction visions that we'll be talking about here.
All right. I think what we can probably start out with is maybe like an exploration of like the trade-offs of building a chain abstracted user experience app versus like what people are building today. How is this world changing? I would say that well, I guess the joke I would make is that like in the old world, the beginning of building an app was always you build a new chain, then you vampire attack Ethereum, and then you try to get builders on your chain. And I think we're trying to build a different world. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Like what are the trade-offs of chain abstraction today?
I think the big difference is that not everyone will want the same security model. And I think this is sort of, in my opinion, becoming obvious. Like, to me, at least, my parents will not want global Ethereum security, no matter how decentralized it is, right? Like, different people have different trade-offs here. They want, like, localized security. And I think chain abstraction is actually one thing where we can have still very composable infrastructure, like a very composable ecosystem of very cool applications in the space. But people can individually pick which specific settlement layer or security zone they want to be using here. And for example, if you live in Argentina, I think probably like you're not going to trust your local government, you're going to trust global Ethereum. And so like depending on which sort of environment you're in, you will have different preferences with regards to which chain you actually want to be on. But I think from a user perspective, it would be nice if I don't have to re-architect my workflows, my applications, if I don't have to carry like 500 different wallets because I'm now flying through like 5 different countries where every single city wants to run its own blockchain. At some point, we need to get to this abstraction I was talking about earlier with regards to like phones just roam and it just works magically under the hood. And I think this is, to me, what chain abstraction is really about.
You were starting from this idea that anyone even knows what the chain is. So if we're going to reach millions of users, I mean, my analogy is when I order a hamburger, I have no idea what cloud service my application is using. So traders care about the infrastructure that they're using at some high level, and we want to be able to not hide those counterparties. But as we go out to much larger user bases, they will care less and less, but they will rely on experts to provide them guidance as to what they can use safely. But when they're experiencing it, they just want to get, they just want to take their money and buy, stake TIA or whatever NFT is exciting them this week.
Yeah, maybe to add that the current state of the world is that centralized exchanges are the kind of main inter-chain protocol. And so that's kind of where we are. And so we relying on them to, not steal our money or, although they fail at doing that sometimes. And so like transitioning from that to, non-custodial, but a unified experience where you can actually transact with all of them with all of the applications across all chains. Now you still, I think the important part, you want to keep the assets where they were issued because the asset issuance is kind of the definition of the security for that asset, right? So the example of Bonk, right? It lives on Solana, and so the kind of you can bridge it to other chains, but now you have multiple extra kind of counterparties involved when you actually want to, for example, transact with it on Near or Ethereum, versus if you are saying, hey, I want some Bonk, and you're getting it on Solana, and it's like but you don't need to think about that. You don't need to like figure out how to bridge your assets to Solana, how to set up a wallet, how to get the gas for buying it, etc. Like if you have all of that transparent for you, like if, for example, Solana stops or rolls back or whatever happens, like all of that is within Solana security and kind of the bonk, and everything is consistent. As soon as you bridge it out and something happens on Solana, now you have inconsistency between the state, potentially between the state, because, you have like somebody sent the asset out, it then that transaction got rolled back, but it arrived on Ethereum. Now you have more bonk than actually was deposited. And so you have that kind of additional like challenges that bridges introduce in general. And so similarly, like at every level, we have kind of this type of complexity. And so keeping things where they are, right, in a way, and making sure that it's really easy to navigate all that space is really, at least for me, like chain abstraction trying to bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so first of all, I should point out,
Mike.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah. Like, I'm not, like, I'm generally not, like, a chain abstraction person. I'm an account abstraction person, and that's, like, I first want to make that distinction, right, because, like, these are very different themes that have very different lineages, right, and, like, they both contain the word abstraction, but I think, you don't want to treat them as the same entity in the same way that, like, you don't necessarily want, South Korea, South Dakota, and South Sudan to all sign a friendship treaty just because they're part of Team South. So putting that aside, right? So different themes. I think, the valuable things here, right, is like expanding the scope of standardization, right, and basically, like if users are doing the same thing or can be doing the same thing, like you want the same infrastructure to be able to provide whatever service the infrastructure is providing across a much larger set of these projects as possible, right? And the reason why that's valuable is basically so that you don't have to start network effects from scratch, and so we don't have this problem where we have like 15 like different standards, and then someone comes along and make one to fix it, and then you have 16 different standards. And I think that part's valuable. I think the part that worries me, and where I think it is encouraging that people are keeping it in mind, is one thing that I don't want to see is I don't want to see a world where we basically slip into making it easier to just not think of the differences between the different chains as mattering, right? And if the only difference between let's say being on Arbitrum and being on Bitcoin and being on Bitcoin SV and Cardano or whatever is that, like, just see like a little thing in the top right of MetaMask, and then 5 years later the UX team decides that even that is annoying, then like that's a world that really reduces the incentive to even try to care about things like security. And I think we do need to like recognize that there definitely is this like really annoying default pressure toward making security worse and worse, and like not caring about decentralization, for the sake of users and for the sake of convenient experiences in the short term. And like I think the more we actually can make it clear that like what is secure and what is not secure, then I think that's something that's really important and valuable. And then the other one is just like not creating these cross systemic risks, right? And that's something where, again, like I actually think some of the ideas that people are working with can actually help, right? Because like I think it's better to hold Solana assets on Solana and Ethereum assets on Ethereum than it is to hold Solana assets on Ethereum or Ethereum assets on Solana, right? And if the more you can make a workflow that makes the first one easy as opposed to the second one, like, again, I think that's actually a good thing, right? But I think we do need to be mindful of like accidentally creating financial systemic risks and accidentally creating things that like interact weirdly with governance and hard forks, things like that.
Yeah, I think the really important, 2 points something, which is assets, like chains issue assets, and you should always route your assets regardless of your interoperability protocol, via the chain that created them, not via some third party. Otherwise, you get into really weird situations as a user where like assets routed by 3 different hubs are not the same fundamentally. And like every chain should route their own assets. And maybe here, this is, I think from my perspective, I was talking about the intent machine earlier, and like, to me, I'm very happy to live in a world where there's sort of, where users all decide to pick a single security model, for example, Ethereum. Like intents aren't really about abstracting away, like having many different chains necessarily. It's just more about having a single programmable API for developers and users that is independent of the security model of the specific chain, but it's totally fine if we all end up on the same chain that is globally maximally decentralized.
I think maybe to kind of poke on the security side of things, right? Because the security of any individual chain is kind of in the eye of the beholder of that chain. And like, I agree on the systemic risk of cross-chain things where indeed you have potential challenges where you're like doing something that, you know, a fork on that chain can pretty much create a cascading effect. But that's part of the, you know, all of the tooling is how do we actually remove that and reduce, you know, bridge dependency as well as ideally kind of the actors that are interacting on top.
The answer is don't roll your own interop protocol. Just use IBC. There's no reason to, like IBC doesn't give a shit about your assets or where it's going or where it's coming from. Just use IBC. Just specify it. It's like TCP/IP, and you're unlikely to ever do better than this. Please don't build custom bridges.
So an IBC for Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Sorry, with a qualifier for Ethereum, totally fine. You need fast finality on either side. If you don't have fast finality on either of those sides, it's hard.
Yeah. So in general, though, kind of how do we communicate the security of this, right? But I think the important part is still, as you said, the kind of what is the governance of these assets, right? Because there's actually an inherent like hierarchy of governance for any application, which inherits the governance of the chain, and then you know, if in case of L2, then inherits also part of the governance of the layer 1. And I think like that system is very not visible right now, and like I don't actually know. Like I mean, I agree that chain abstraction is we're trying to move away from that, but we try to keep things like where they are. But I don't know if like there's ideas how to actually create this visibility outside of L2 beat.
So I'd like to add something on top of this, though. You know, and some of that, you know, so absolutely want to keep assets where they are, but the applications people want are not just about the assets. I mean, it's you know, people ask for things like, I'm staking something, I'm getting staking rewards. Some of that I'd like to restake. Some of that I would like to take and use to build a position in Bitcoin over on that other chain. How do I route that? How do I program that? How do I manage that? How do I route that? How do I program it? How do I manage that? That's the thing, you know, programming that kind of activity is really hard. We see people working really hard to do stuff that is frankly pretty basic stuff, right? Just I've got assets on this chain, I want to buy and stake assets on that chain, and right now it takes people hours, and it should be something where you click a button and you're done. And so there's, you know, in order to get those use cases, in order to get even simple use cases, there's a lot of stuff that naturally in the programming we have to be able to abstract away, right? I mean, and you know, to Vitalik's point, we need to be able to, well, actually, all of us are sort of agreeing on this, but the question is, where does it show up and how do we do it? We need to be able to separate out those concerns so I can easily write move the asset there and stake it, that's what I'm approving, in a way that does not hide the counterparties, that does not hide the security that I'm relying on. I am dubious and this about, I really would like all of those infras to be secure. I'd like people to just use IBC. I'd like people to use, you know, the evolving stronger, I would say, you know, stronger than bridging protocol between these things. But oh my God, there's a lot of crap out there going over rickety bridges, right? And the thing, you know, and those are the things where we need to be able to build apps that can subsume that and then enable us to keep our eye on the ball and make those more secure, right? Keep our eye on the ball and replace some of these multi-sigs with stronger security, and represent that out, as you were saying, represent that out to the user or out to the auditors and the development community, so that we're all sort of aligned with hardening those up, as opposed to simply getting rid of the icon that says this is risky, right? So a big part of this is, how do we enable developers to do that stuff? How do we orchestrate all those activities?
I mean, chain signatures help.
Chain signatures help. Some of the UX stuff helps. Programming the business logic in an ASIC programming language that reaches across IBC helps, which is what Agoric does. The intents will help. Any one of several intent solutions.
Well, I think there's like a natural flow there too. I think a lot of what we're trying to do with chain abstraction and account abstraction, I think like where there is a continuum is they are about delegating authority. So like, when do you want to be able to when is it easiest to delegate authority to a device, so you can have some subdelegation? When do you want to have an agent involved? When do you want to have an intent? How do you think about what the applicability of intents are along this like spectrum?
Yeah, I think intents are a way for users to define what kind of authority they want to delegate into whom. Like Anoma or intents make no preference choices for users on their behalf in terms of, you should be going to an MPC solution, you should be going towards a chain signature solution, you should be going towards a smart contract account. Intents don't, I think this is about being able to, so that users can express what kind of specific delegation model they want to have. For example, like one good example here is, if I have a bunch of private data on my edge device, right? Like I have a bunch of nodes, I may want to be able to do proofs over partial state transitions locally in order to minimize my data loss going to the public. But an intent can also specify things like, I only want to send this to like these 3 trusted people based on this metric, because if you want to get counterparty discovery, you must necessarily be sharing something anyway. Like you can't do counterparty discovery in full privacy, for example, because otherwise, how do you discover? Even like FAG doesn't solve this. So I think intents are about giving users a common framework or API so that they can specify sort of the levels of delegation that they want to achieve. This is at least how I view intents.
So, I mean, with respect to intents, I mean, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there that we can get to quickly as we then evolve and learn and iterate. That's an area where the ideas are good. The core of it, so we have on Agoric, we have the offer system, which is intents, where I'm expressing an intent essentially to a particular contract. It's not, hey, searchers, go find me this swap to happen. It's I will give you this asset, I will give you this much ETH if you give me that particular NFT. And the infrastructure enforces that it can't have the ETH unless it gives me the NFT, which means that I either get what I want or I get my money back. That's that give and want is an element of many of these intents, and then you can get richer and richer expression, like you say, and only do it to these end counterparties or that sort of thing. That is a very small amount of delegation. It doesn't give you much ability to write complex logic on chain to dynamically change delegation. And so that's where I go back to what's the programming model for writing something that is a portfolio manager, right? That's going to rebalance dynamically. It had the authority to do a whole lot of asynchronous movement of a whole lot of assets in order to rebalance my portfolio. I'm certainly not signing each of those transactions. I need to have given it some assets with some model of what it's going to do with them, without giving it access to all my authority, without approving. Yeah, you can just dig into my bank account, look at all my data, grab all my assets, no problem, right? You really want to be able to take assets, hand it to a contract, have the contract be able to take assets or take rights as a first-class thing, hand them to another contract, and build these networks of interacting businesses that can really solve some of those problems. And each one of those steps is delegation, but it's got to be very easy to program. It's got to be very easier for programs to do that, not just the humans.
I mean, that is kind of what we're solving with this multi-party computation, where you delegate the authority of using pretty much kind of your associated accounts on other chains And now you can write a smart contract that, rebalances things across all chains. You can write a smart contract that, borrows against it, the one that, executes multi-chain intents. Like, you can now program that. And indeed, you have this engine in the middle that you delegate authority to do this.
I think it's worth noting from that, a lot of the new use cases of chain, that fall under chain abstraction are ones that are like, portfolio management is intrinsically not about a particular chain. It might be implemented in a smart contract on Near or Agoric or what have you, but the problem the user wanted and the application developer is building is one that is intrinsically this cross-chain, this multi-chain application, because it's about solving a problem that's cross-chain. And that's kind of new, and there's a lot of people that are now running into the limits, and we're sort of aware of chain abstraction being I'll be interested to see what your opinion is, but being an important narrative going forward, because not just sort of mainstream users, but traders want this stuff where they've got applications that are about a multi-chain interaction. And
I think this level of programmability is both multi-chain, but you can also use it locally, because now you can have social recovery contracts, for example, that can execute transactions on your behalf as well. So you have a pretty wide range of developerability given this assumption of delegated authority. And so the question is how do we measure that compared to other options as well, for example, IBC being in interchain accounts, but at least the idea here is that you have an ability now to go to any chain and locally then maintain the security there, which again I think is a huge benefit, because we have chains who roll back, we have chains who stop, we have chains who edit state, all of these things are happening, and so you want to follow those rules as much as possible, even if it's fast finality doesn't always mean it's not going to be rolled back.
I think one thing that's important to keep in mind here is that chain abstraction probably should be concentric, in the sense that there are things that it makes sense to abstract across the entire crypto ecosystem. There are things that make sense to abstract across a security domain, for example. There's things that make sense to abstract across the set of chains that exactly share a particular VM, or across a particular sub-universe, the Starknet, sub-universe, for example, and then you go down to individual domains and you go down to individual applications, right? If you're a wallet, right, then, and you want to offer your users social recovery, for example, then there's one way to do that on Ethereum. There's one way to do that on Bitcoin, which basically involves just moving all your assets over to new addresses. And, those ways require very different code paths, right? And that's, it's fine, and that's unavoidable. And I don't even think we should be trying to force a convergence, because I think there's a lot of value to these, different ecosystems, actually having these different characters and exploring, different philosophies that their participants value. But then, if you go, if you look at within the Ethereum security zone, for example, I just a couple of hours ago talked about key store contracts, which would basically let you store the mutable part of an account in one place, right? So it depends on what specific thing you're talking about, what specific functionalities that thing depends on, and what actually is the size of the zone across which that functionality actually holds. And sometimes it does, but then sometimes, if you're offering a service, you're just going to have to do ongoing work across many ecosystems, right? At a very minimum, for example, if you want to have a portfolio manager across, let's say both Ethereum and Bitcoin, which are two ecosystems that have off-chain governance that's independent of each other, then you will have to make updates occasionally that follow along both the consensus of the Ethereum community and the consensus of the Bitcoin community, right? And that's not something that I think we should try to really move past, because we can't. But on the other hand, a lot of other things are not like that.
I think we should be. I think sort of the convergence I'd like to see is that at least we can agree on sort of very fundamental APIs between different security domains. This is sort of, and I know with Bitcoin, sort of that train has left the station a long time ago. But I hope with sort of everything since Bitcoin generation 2 that we can try to converge on at least similar looking APIs so that not everyone has to fundamentally write new code path. And this won't work for, and this can even encode things like different security domains, right? Like we don't want to have everything converge to the same security domain, but we probably, like, at least from my perspective, I think the more we can standardize on sort of the interface level, and I don't mean in terms of UI level, I mean like protocol interface level, the easier we're going to make the lives of all of us going forward under the assumption that over time, there will be many different security domains that exist. And so, like, given that this is probably a reality we'll have to contend with, it'd be nice to have at least base level APIs to be somewhat similar across many different security domains.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like, payments, I think, are an obvious place where that should happen, including with Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah. Accounts actually are the other one, I think. If we can at least standardize on accounts, we'd be like so much further.
Something that I think is worth noting that this is a great problem to have, right? We have the chain abstraction is solving a problem that only exists because we have all these, roll-ups have succeeded, layer 2s have succeeded, modular has succeeded, interoperability has succeeded. So we have all these independent activities with different security models and different performance characteristics and different execution models and all that sort of stuff that now have some level of interoperability, some level of interconnectivity, and we're now trying to manage, we're now trying to solve problems at the next layer up on top of that, the opportunity that created. And some of those, of course, as we say, some of those interoperability mechanisms are pretty rickety, multi-sig bridges or what have you, but it's really nice to be in this space where we've gotten far enough that we have this opportunities.
Actually, one thing we should standardize on, in my opinion, is safe. Like, if we just enshrine all the safe contracts into everything, totally fine. Plus, like, the EVM account format, it's okay. If this is sort of the minimal thing we can get to, safe is a good enough thing, I think.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Any sort of, I guess, concretely, what is the next problem you want? Like, what is the next thing that is built with chain abstraction that you want to see catch on in the world?
I mean, for me, it is a decentralized exchange which just spans all chains and works like a rollup we launch right now between all of us should be already there. Like, there should not be a need for, listing, integration, spinning up nodes. Like, it should be a way to, like, we spun it up on my laptop. Okay, now it's available for everyone to use because we have the security zone is like figured out and it's integrated into whatever DA and picks up, and then you have the whatever chain ID propagated, and you have kind of all those pieces fall in place and at once.
I'll do a much simpler one. I mean, there's two waves, right? There's the wave of applications of cross-chain, multi-chain applications for existing crypto participants. And there, yes, decentralized DEX that crosses all chains, absolutely. But that's a much bigger, I mean, it ought to be easy, but none of these things right now are easy at all. And we're working hard on getting that easy. Having simple scenario of, I've got, USDC on ETH and I want to buy staked TIA, right? That was the scenario, several $1 billion did last month, right? Turns out that's really damn hard, and it's absurd how hard it is. And so, let's make it so that those simple scenarios are easy, because it turns out there's a lot of them and there's a lot of people that concurrently want to build that. And so I think that, that to me is at least, maybe that's the crawl, walk, run stage, and you're talking about the walk. But man, let's make sure that crawling is easy, and then it'll be much easier to understand how we get to that exchange that spans all of these, all the different chains straightforwardly in a usable way. And then the next wave after that is these cross-chain applications for end users and for mainstream users.
I think from my side, I'd like to see more sort of Typhon and Chimera chains, because I think there's a large benefit to having a specified protocol for a shared sequencer. Like that's a generalized shared sequencer. I think this is going, because like if you look at sort of the existing model, a lot of these things are starting to fragment, and I think if we can do more work on sort of shared sequencing and like generalized shared sequencing with something like Chimera chains, I think that'd be very helpful. Personally, the thing that I'd be very excited about is, like, as a very practical thing, like have two cities run a chain that can opt into like a shared block once in a while, so that you can have like a local currency issued in chain one, and like in the city of Zug, and like in the city of Berlin runs its own chain, and like people can actually use localized security domains. I think that'd be very cool.
I think we'll solve Web3 faster than cities will run blockchains.
Hopefully.
You thought crypto governance was hard.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally like focusing on the 80, the 80-20 or even the 90-10, right? It's like, the 95-5 of intense is limit orders, right? And
Sadly.
And I think probably in this case also the 90-10 of chain abstraction, like what is it? I mean, I think actually like cross-chain exchange and cross-chain payments is like a really big one, right? Like the thing, for every user that even knows what it means to yield farm and have the yield immediately go out to some other yield thing, there is like 10 that just want to pay people. And, most of the, whenever I've had to pay people on an L2, a lot of the time they were on a different L2 from me, right? And it would be nice to just, have a wallet and, you could paste in an address where you have, the chain : whatever your underlying address is, and then it just like automatically routes it into either a regular payments on chain or through like whatever kind of DEX you're willing to accept, and like depending on what the source and output chain is, and that just is something that would work across the ecosystem. Like I think that would be amazing.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.